You've spent your entire life explaining yourself to people who never had the right to ask. Every time you defended a decision to someone whose opinion shouldn't have mattered. Every time you chased approval from a crowd that would forget you the moment you stopped performing. Every time you reacted, justified, or begged to be understood, you handed away a piece of your power, and you didn't even feel it leave your hands. Today that ends. I'm about to show you 7 psychological principles, drawn from Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy, principles that will teach you how to stop chasing, stop explaining, and become someone who cannot be moved, manipulated, or made to perform for anyone's approval. Most people live according to what Nietzsche called herd morality, reacting the way the crowd expects, justifying themselves the moment anyone frowns, chasing validation like it's oxygen. They think this makes them good. They think this makes them safe. They're wrong. It makes them predictable. And predictable people are the easiest people alive to control. The ones who actually move through the world with power. The ones nobody can rattle, nobody can guilt, nobody can chase down for an explanation. They operate by a different law entirely. Nietzsche spent his life describing that law. Today you're going to learn it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why silence unsettles people more than any argument. Why withdrawing strategically makes you magnetic instead of cold. Why explaining yourself to the wrong person is a quiet form of self-betrayal. This isn't about becoming cruel. This is about becoming sovereign. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I no longer explain myself to those who haven't earned it. Let's begin. Number 1. Master morality. Decide who deserves your reaction. Nietzsche split human behavior into 2 moral frameworks. Master morality and slave morality. Slave morality reacts. It defines itself by what it's against, by who wronged it, by constantly measuring itself against everyone else's opinion. Master morality doesn't ask permission to exist. It simply acts from its own values and lets the rest of the world catch up or fall away. Here's what almost nobody realizes. Every time you respond to an insult, a jab, a backhanded comment from someone who was never operating in good faith, you've quietly stepped into slave morality. You've let their judgment become the reference point for your worth. You're now reacting instead of creating, defending instead of building. The master doesn't ask, did I deserve that criticism? The master asks a completely different question. Does this person's opinion have any bearing on the values I've built for myself? And when the answer is no, which it almost always is, the master simply continues. No comeback, no correction, no energy spent proving a point to someone who was never going to update their view anyway. This is not arrogance, it's discernment. You are not required to enter every argument you're invited into. Every time you decline the invitation, you keep your power intact instead of handing it to whoever threw the first insult. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I decide who deserves my reaction. Number 2, silence is the will that needs no audience. Nietzsche believed that the will to power, at its highest form, doesn't need to announce itself. The weakest form of power performs. It needs witnesses, applause, confirmation. The strongest form simply is, whether anyone is watching or not. This is why silence unsettles people so deeply. When someone provokes you and you respond with words, you've confirmed that their provocation landed. You've shown your hand. But when you say nothing, you've given them no evidence of impact at all. And the human mind cannot tolerate that kind of uncertainty. They will replay the moment. They will wonder if you even noticed. They will, without meaning to, hand you back the very power they were trying to take. Every explanation you offer is a small surrender to an audience that hasn't earned the right to judge you. Nietzsche despised the idea of living for the crowd's verdict, performing your justifications like a defendant in a trial you never agreed to attend. The person who needs no audience to validate their choices has already won a kind of freedom most people never taste. This doesn't mean go silent with everyone. It means reserve your words for people in moments that actually deserve them, and let silence answer everything else. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence needs no permission. Number 3. Withdraw. Like the Übermensch. Present. Never available. Nietzsche's Übermensch doesn't retreat from the world. He simply refuses to be owned by it. There's a critical difference between disappearing and becoming unpossessable. Disappearing is defeat. Becoming unpossessable is mastery. Most people think power means being everywhere, responding instantly, staying constantly available to prove their loyalty or worth. But constant availability doesn't build respect, it erodes it. The moment people know they can access you unconditionally, at any hour, under any behavior, they stop valuing the access at all. Strategic withdrawal is different. You remain in the world. You remain in the relationship, the friendship, the room. But you stop performing constant availability as proof of your devotion. Sometimes you engage fully. Sometimes you don't. Nobody can map you with certainty. And that uncertainty is precisely what keeps your presence valuable instead of assumed. Nietzsche warned against becoming what he called a reactive being, someone whose entire rhythm is dictated by other people's demands. The Übermensch sets his own rhythm. He shows up on his own terms, and his absence, when it happens, is felt precisely because his presence was never guaranteed. Number 4, let ressentiment destroy them from within. Nietzsche coined the term ressentiment to describe a specific kind of poison, the corrosive bitterness of people who feel powerless, who can't act directly against what threatens them. So instead they seethe, they gossip, they quietly undermine from a distance. He believed ressentiment eats the person carrying it far more than it ever touches its target. Here's what this means for you. When someone spreads rumors, criticizes from the sidelines, or quietly root for your failure, the instinct is to correct the record, to defend your name, to make sure everyone knows the truth. But engaging with ressentiment gives it exactly what it's starving for: your attention, your energy, evidence that it landed. Nietzsche's insight was that ressentiment cannot survive being ignored. It needs a reaction to justify its own existence. The moment you refuse to supply that reaction, the bitterness has nowhere left to go except back into the person who's carrying it. They sit with their own resentment unanswered while you continue building. You don't need to expose them. You don't need the last word. Their own ressentiment is already doing more damage to them than anything you could say back. Drop this affirmation in the comments: their resentment is not my burden to fix. Number 5, amor fati. Nothing external can touch what you've already accepted. Amor fati, the love of one's fate, is Nietzsche's answer to a world that constantly tries to provoke a reaction out of you. It means accepting everything that happens, the praise and the insult, the setback and the success, so completely that none of it has the power to destabilize you anymore. Most people are hostages to their own emotional triggers. A comment about their intelligence sends them into a defensive spiral. A hint of disrespect ruins their entire week. Someone else's disapproval becomes a referendum on their worth. This isn't strength. Nietzsche would call it a kind of slavery, where your inner state is constantly at the mercy of outside noise. Amor fati builds the opposite condition. When you've made total peace with your fate, your choices, your past, your reputation among people who don't matter, external opinion simply has nowhere to land. Someone calls you difficult. Fine, you already know who you are. Someone doubts your work. Fine, the work continues regardless. Nothing sticks, not because you're numb, but because you've already accepted it before it arrived. This is the real armor. Not indifference to life, but total ownership of it, so complete that nothing outside of you gets to write the story anymore. Number 6, become who you are. Ascend through refusal. Become who you are? Nietzsche wrote, and buried inside that phrase is a discipline most people never practice. The discipline of refusal. Becoming who you are requires constantly refusing to become who other people need you to be for their own comfort. Someone wants you to explain a decision you don't owe them. Refuse. Someone wants you to shrink your ambition so they feel more comfortable. Refuse. Someone wants you to chase their approval to prove you still care what they think. Refuse. Each refusal isn't rejection for its own sake. It's the slow, deliberate sculpting of a self that isn't built from other people's expectations. This is where real ascent happens, not by fighting your way to the top, not by proving yourself in every room you enter, but by refusing to descend into the smaller version of yourself that other people find easier to manage. Every time you decline to perform, defend, or chase, you carve away more of what wasn't you to begin with. Nietzsche believed most people never become anything at all. They simply remain an accumulation of other people's demands. The ones who ascend are the ones who kept refusing long, enough to find out who was underneath. Drop this affirmation in the comments: I refuse to become smaller for anyone's comfort. Number 7, eternal recurrence. Live the version you'd choose again. The final idea is the one Nietzsche considered his heaviest thought, and it might be the most powerful tool on this entire list: eternal recurrence. Imagine every choice you make, every reaction you give, every moment you chase someone's approval or explain yourself to someone unworthy of it. Imagine you had to live that exact moment again, and again, infinitely, forever. Would you still chase them? Would you still explain? Would you still hand your peace to someone who was never going to value it? This thought experiment is a filter. It strips away every reactive impulse and asks a brutal question. If this moment repeated forever, is this who I actually want to be? Most people, when they run their behavior through that filter, realize how much of their life has been spent reacting to people and situations that will never appear in the version of their life they'd actually choose to repeat. Nietzsche wasn't offering comfort. He was offering a test for how you actually want to live. Not performed for an audience, not reactive to provocation, but a life you would affirm exactly as it is, again and again, without needing anyone else's permission to do so. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I live the life I would choose to repeat forever. In this video, you've learned to decide who actually deserves your reaction, instead of handing it out freely. You've learned that silence, not argument, is the sharper weapon. You've learned to withdraw strategically instead of disappearing or over-explaining your presence. You've watched ressentiment consume the people who carry it while you simply continue. You've built the total acceptance of amor fati, where nothing external gets to destabilize you. You've practiced the discipline of refusal that lets you become who you actually are. And you've run your life through the heaviest test Nietzsche ever proposed. Would you choose to live it again exactly as it is? These aren't just quotes from a philosopher who's been dead for over a century. They're a functioning system for anyone tired of chasing approval, explaining themselves to people who were never listening, and reacting to noise that was never worth their peace. From this moment forward, you don't chase. You don't explain. You don't perform for a verdict you never agreed to be judged by. You simply become who you already are and let the rest of the world catch up. If this video gave you language for something you've felt for years but never named, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Share it with someone still explaining themselves to people who don't deserve it. And subscribe, because we're just getting started. Drop "I am sovereign" in the comments right now. Make the commitment, speak it into existence. You never chase. You never explain, you simply become.